Tonight we're going to look at the politics during the Great Depression, specifically the presidency of Herbert Hoover and how that led into Franklin Delano Roosevelt's presidency. So the guiding question that I want you to keep in mind is, what actions did Hoover take in response to the Great Depression? So Hoover had some political philosophies going into the Great Depression. His background was primarily in business, and he had worked some in the government service, but mostly he worked in the private sector in various businesses. He also served in the Harding and Coolidge administrations and really shared a lot of their ideas about government's role in business. Basically felt like the government should have a small role in business to stay as far out of things as possible. They didn't feel like that government should be able to involve itself with anything that was business related. He believed that unnecessary government threatened the prosperity and the spirit of the American people. So he felt like having too much of that government intervention took some wealth away from people that it shouldn't necessarily take that wealth away from. A key part of this was rugged individualism, and we're going to look at what rugged individualism is here on the next board. So just to hit on that rugged individualism really quickly, it's right down here at the bottom. It's a belief that anybody can succeed on their own and that government help should be minimal. So it's very similar to the Republican Party today, in that the government response to helping out people should, that we really should have a hands-off approach. So how Hoover's philosophy, I guess, during the Great Depression was to be optimistic, to be confident, because if you don't show that confidence, then people are going to start to stress out. He really wanted to downplay what was going on in the economy, downplay what was going on in the banks. He felt like if you downplayed all of that stuff, that there would be less frantic actions. He said the government should intervene as little as possible. That's a common thread throughout all of this. And that the market would eventually fix itself. He felt like it was just kind of a natural thing for these things to occur. So just a couple of little quick things about Hoover's presidency. He was the 31st president, and he was president from 1929 till 1933. So he inherited a lot of these economic problems. He did not cause these economic problems by any means. They were greater issues that led into the Great Depression. He just inherited it as a president, much like we've seen presidents do in the past. He really, unfortunately, struggled with inspiring the American people. He was not, a hugely inspirational speaker. He wasn't very charismatic. Most of the presidents that you've seen in your lifetime are very charismatic because they're in the TV age. Hoover was just not a charismatic president. He did not believe in using direct government intervention. Instead, he relied on what he called volunteerism, and that was asking corporations and large companies to voluntarily improve their working conditions and wages. Obviously, that was not something that worked because a lot of those larger businesses and corporations were struggling during the Great Depression as well. He was short-tempered and defensive, which you really can't be when you are, talking to masses of people, trying to motivate the public. You can't be defensive in a time of economic crisis. And unfortunately, he had to run for re-election right there in 1933, which was in the middle of the Depression, probably at one of the worst points throughout all of this stuff because the Dust Bowl had occurred and the unemployment rate was as high as it possibly could be. But there were several not so flattering names given to institutions around Herbert Hoover. So Hoovervilles were like shanty towns, and they were built in public parks and public places, and really, and we'll look at some pictures of them, but really it was kind of almost like a homeless camp. A Hoover hotel is a cardboard shack. A Hoover flag would be an empty pocket that was inside out. So none of those things were necessarily positive statements on Herbert Hoover's presidency. People protested wherever he appeared. Just like we see in modern times, there is a lot of, the government really, really has to take on a lot of the responsibility of people's unhappiness. So like I said, Hoover's responses to the Great Depression basically kind of unfortunately sunk his ship in re-election in 1932. People were done with him. They didn't like his laissez-faire economics. They felt like, his presidency had contributed to some of the issues within the Great Depression. He ran against Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was very charismatic, very confident. He was a former governor of New York. He had that Roosevelt last name. He appeared to be far more energetic and capable than Hoover. But keep in mind, we're going to look at FDR's presidency. He was in a wheelchair, so it's amazing that he appeared to be that much more energetic than somebody that was in seemingly good health like Herbert Hoover. Roosevelt's first inaugural address was basically a landmark in American speeches. We're going to look or listen to some of Roosevelt's speeches when they really are. It's interesting to compare Roosevelt's speeches to some of the great speeches that we know of today. Roosevelt's going to quickly set on a course to help out, to try to get things fixed. He is going to have a more active role in trying to end the Great Depression. And it's really going to change America's relationship with its government. So we'll look more into Franklin Delano Roosevelt tomorrow night. But make sure that you're familiar with Herbert Hoover and his role as president and the way that he approached the Great Depression. And I will see you guys tomorrow.